Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LRW 2020 virtual conference, Rail Technology panel on data sharing and pervasive computing. I'm Patricia Baswell, Events Chair at the League of Railway Women and User Experience Manager at Wytronics. So before we get started, let's go over a few items. Please, unfortunately, we can't see or hear you, so please use the questions pane in your GoToWebinar control panel. And also feel free to use the audio pane to get the phone dial-in details if you prefer, or if you have any audio issues at all. And as always, during any LRW session, please be considerate and respectful to all participants and to behave in a way that creates a safe and welcoming environment. Please note that we are recording the session and we'll be making the video and presentation available to all participants after the conference. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our host, Michelle Ardron. She is the Senior Specialist of Network Operations at Via Rail Canada, who will also introduce our panelists. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Patricia. Thank you. So thanks to League of Railway Women for organizing this conference in these times and being agile enough to go to an online platform. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of such a great event, and I'm super happy to be part of this session, particularly on rail technology, panel on data sharing and pervasive computing. It's super close to me because of the interoperability that my organization faces, being a tenant railway on host operators infrastructure. So I think we have a great panel. They're going to discuss the limitations of data exchange between railroads today, the possibility of improved data sharing in the future that impacts rail operations. They're also going to provide their perspective on the benefits and downsides of data sharing and how that affects the balance between competition and cooperation, and what the future might hold as even more data is added to the mix. And again, as we see this interoperability through the organizations, I think this is going to be super important going forward. So as I said, this panel is super diverse, and I think it's an excellent panel from all walks of the industry to speak on this topic. So first, I want to introduce Kim Bowling. She is our Director of Mechanical at CSX, where she has been since 1991. She spent the last 9 years on wayside detection, development, and integration, and she has been at CSX for 29 years in the mechanical side. She has a degree in mechanical and material engineering from Vanderbilt University and an MBA from the University of Florida. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you for having us.
Next, we have Mihir Phadke. He is the product manager for train operation products at Wytronics. Prior to joining Wytronics in 2018, he spent 11 years at Cummins. Mihir has a BSME from Pune University in India and an MSME from the University of Cincinnati and an MBA from Purdue. Welcome, Mihir.
Thank you.
And last on our panel, we have Jenny Moore. Jenny is a solution consultant and product manager at Bartlett & West with a focus on freight rail industry. She is a certified GIS professional and a certified project manager. So welcome, Jenny. And this is our panel for today's session on rail technology, panel on data sharing and pervasive computing and interoperability. And we are going to start off our session with Kim's presentation. So I turn it over to you, Kim.
All right, so we were going to talk about different ways to get data and get it back and share it. So what we have been working on as an industry is working on all the wayside detectors. So think of different machines that are on the side of the track that measure performance of bearings and wheels, as well as doing imaging as the train passes. So the industry actually has been working together to share these kinds of data together. We have created the standard through several AER committees. And now, which is pretty amazing, that we've actually got much of the data centralized at the RailLink data center. and we're able to now share those data. And if occurrences happen on a different railroad and that car is interchanged, I am able to now share that data. So that's almost getting to be old school now of how we share data from wayside detectors. And the other new thing that we'll talk about as well is the moats technology. So somehow it got to be a shortened form of the word remote, but it's imagine a sensor that is on board each of the rail cars that measures technology and can measure bearing heat. It can measure lateral impacts. It can use the GIS feature to figure out where I am without having to go buy an AEI reader. So those are just some of the new data sharing that we're working on the car side of the world.
That's great. And so next we will ask Mihir to give his presentation.
Okay, hey, thank you, Michelle, and welcome everybody. So I work for Vitronics. Vitronics is a technology company. We have 12,000 installations on a mix of freight and transit or passenger applications in the US. It's basically a computer with a lot of I/O, as I kind of simplify it. So we talk to event recorders, we talk to control systems, we talk to either our own cameras or external third-party cameras. We talk to fuel sensors, and the reason I mentioned that is so we have been doing more locomotive based data sharing is kind of how I think of it. So when you have a locomotive that gets interchanged, Vitronics enables to do fuel reconciliation, right? So we have class ones or short lines who will put tripwires when a locomotive goes from one territory to the other. So you get a timestamp for when the locomotive crossed, how much fuel was in the locomotive, what heading, what direction, and so on and so forth. So just making that process a little bit simpler for our railroads. Similarly, horsepower per hour reconciliation, kind of same similar format. So that's kind of how Vitronics has been playing in this space. We'll talk as we go through the panel. We'll talk about event recorder and video exchange and some of the things we have done, like allowing remote downloads of event recorder of video data and then sharing that, especially in the case of incidents, and just simplifying that whole process. So we have that, and then again we'll talk more about kind of where we see it going further, how do we automate some of these things, and so on and so forth. But yeah, definitely a very exciting area for us.
Awesome, thank you, Mihir. And our third panelist, Jenny Moore. Jenny?
Thank you, Michelle. I take this as a different perspective. Kim comes from it from the railroad perspective. She's got boots on the ground, products on rolling stock, assets in the field. Mihir and his team are all out there building those products, capturing the data, analyzing it in its own capacity and for what they're looking for. I work with Bartlett & West, we're a consulting company, and we focus on integrating rail technologies. So we don't own our own railroad. We don't own our own products. We don't have boots on the ground, but we are the ones that will help the railroads take that information, pull it together, synthesize it, and help bring it together in a way that makes better business decisions for the railroads themselves.
Awesome, thanks so much, Jenny. So I think everyone would agree with your statement, Jenny, for sure. It's a really vast panel. You guys come at it from almost every angle, and I think that makes this panel super interesting in that regard. So we have some questions that we're going to put to the panel, and I think probably just in terms of this question, I'd like each of you to take a couple minutes and answer it, but I think this one specifically will start with Kim. I think it's more in her area, but it'll be interesting to see the rest of your perspective on the question. So the question that we have is, how do railroads, or your railroad, and I guess for you, Jenny, it's probably your organization, typically exchange data with other railroads when they share tracks, locomotives, and cars? So I know each of you have a different perspective on it. So I guess we'll start with Kim, and we'll move from Kim, Mihir, and Jenny. If you each just take a couple of minutes to think about, share how that is in your organization, that data sharing.
Right. So in the past, we actually had data that came into our back office, and we used it. And mostly, I'm still talking about wayside detectors, but We would just use the data and that was that. Now that these AER committees have created a method to share, now we actually reformat the data. We push a lot of the data back up to RailLink where it's available there. So if you're a car owner or a car lessor or another railroad, then you can have the ability to measure my measurements or see my measurements that we've pushed up from wild to acoustic to machine vision. All that data package is now pushed up to RailLink. So now it's available. There's a standard national format. So now it's available for sharing. If you want to do histories on cars, that's available. The newest, coolest thing we're working on too is to share hotbox detector data. So if you guys know, we have generally every 20 miles down the road, we'll have a hotbox detector. But at interchange, that car comes across and we really don't know any history about it. We might get an advanced consist, but we really don't know. Is it healthy? Does it have round wheels? Are the bearings healthy or not? So now we're able to start consuming data from across interchange. So imagine, I comes across the Mississippi River and now I can see that car, I can see its history. I can listen to the detectors on the other side of interchange, which is pretty cool because we think of the edge of all the interchange places like the edge of the network, and a lot of stuff happens where you don't really know. And now we're able to kind of see all those other detectors that are out there. And it's great because we're sharing data in the name of safety to make sure that all these products, all these cars that come through are measured, they're healthy, and they're not going to cause issues when they get back onto our side of the interchange.
Yeah, crazy. I mean, we've moved from a time of a, hotbox detector was simply a lagging indicator, right? It was always when the bearings or wheels were too hot, and now it's a leading indicator. We've got information and technology out on the infrastructure that'll give you that kind of information. That's fantastic. And I know that's Mihir's domain now. So Mihir, on the technology or Ytronics side, what is your perspective on this data exchange now?
Yeah, no, I mean, Kim really hit it. I actually made a note about hotbox detector. It's really interesting thing to explore. But no, so I kind of simplified, right? So essentially, railroads are exchanging, in my mind, one of maybe 4 things. And Kim, you can add more color or more things, right? So obviously, exchanging cars. Right? That's the whole reason for a railroad, and passengers, depending on what the cargo is. Obviously, locomotives. And then there is EOTs and those kinds of things that get exchanged, right? So those are the big things. And how do I take it to the next level and start looking at data that's tied to one of these, right? So I kind of hinted we look at fuel reconciliation, so fuel exchange when locomotives cross over, horsepower per hour reconciliation. I touched on event recorder and DVR data share. So if I'm a CSX, let's say I'm a CSX asset on a BNSF train and it unfortunately gets into an accident. How do I, BNSF, quickly get data from CSX? How do I enable that data transfer, that video data transfer without having to wait 1, 2, 3 days, wait for a physical download, right? So that's a lot of what we do today, not what we can do, but a lot of what we do today. I think the next frontier for us is how do I start taking costs, or how do I start automating some of these things? So for example, to do a fuel exchange right now, participating railroads have to draw tripwires, and they have to agree that this is a tripwire where you go from CSX to a BNSF headed west, right? How do I not have them use tripwires, but instead use lat longe? Since I have a computer on board that has a GPS, right? I know where the locations are. So how do I use that technology to automate that? Similarly, we talk about sharing videos, right? So we have some functionality called Wireless Share, which allows, as I said, the CSX to directly share video with a BNSF in an incident case like that. So how do I automate that without needing cost, or without doing it manually? That's kind of one area of focus. The second area of focus is, again, a lot of this is sort of on incident or at a fixed time. So how do I move from that to making it on demand, right? So if I'm a CSX train on a BNSF, or a CSX asset on a BNSF train, I'm BNSF, I want to run fuel calculations for how my train did, right? How do I make sure that you have access to fuel data from the CSX asset when it was on a BNSF train, basically for the entire life of the train, right? That way you don't have holes in your gallon per gross ton mile calculations. You have the entire picture. You basically look at that foreign asset if it was on your train as if it was your own native asset. So how do we enable some of those things that make this data exchange more fluid?
Thank you, Mihir. Excellent. And Jenny, I guess from your perspective?
For our perspective, some of the key things to consider are formats and frequency of data exchange. Formats being some of the common ones. You got CAD, you got GIS, you got the dreaded spreadsheet, but it's still out there. We're getting some of the newer feeds like media, feed, video, acoustics, whatever you need in a digital format. But what we're trying to push for and where the world's taking us with technology these days are near real-time GPS feeds and other related data feeds, whether it's telemetrics, you name it. And then the machine learning capabilities for change management and change detection on those video feeds and those data analysis pieces. The frequency is the other part that we focus on when there's data exchanging between railroads. Your customer doesn't care if it went through 5 railroads to get from point A to them or from them to point B. What they need to know is, did it get there as I intended it to? And if you're basing your routes and your predictions and your cost on older data or static one-time provided data rather than real-time feeds and updating your processes, you're not getting the full picture. You're not bringing the full benefit to the table. So pushing towards that two-way data sharing or that open feed source is where technology is taking us today.
Interesting perspective, Jenny, for sure. And I'm like Kim from the industry, so definitely a different perspective for those of us that don't come from that side of the industry. I guess for our next question, what we wanted to sort of pick your brains about was, how does knowing or not knowing where locomotives are on your track, how a foreign crew uses your locomotive or where your rolling stock is at all times impacts the operation or network efficiency? And maybe Mihir, I know certainly I've worked with your organization and I know we have your stuff on board our locomotives. So maybe we'll start with you this time. How do you, how does knowing or not knowing where the locomotives are, how foreign crews use locomotives and rolling stock, how does it impact operations and network efficiency? So we'll start with you on this one, maybe.
Okay, yeah, I can take a stab. So I'll keep pulling on CSX and BNSF in my make-believe example. So back on the CSX asset on a BNSF train, right? So how do I, BNSF, know if that train with TO equipped asset is actually being used by my engineer? If it's a BNSF, it's my own asset, I obviously know, right? If it's a CSX asset, I do not have visibility if my engineer on my train with a foreign asset is making utilization of all these energy management tools, right? So that's sort of one downside of not having visibility to a foreign asset, or flying blind, as kind of how I think of it. Similarly, if the engineer is, in train handling, like you kind of touched on it, stretch braking, power brake, I can go on, long list of things. If the engineer is doing, how do I get visibility in real time? Again, native asset, I got it, right? We provide real-time alerts. Foreign asset, I'm flying blind. I kind of touched briefly on fuel, right? If I'm doing fuel just gallon per gross ton mile, fuel conservation metrics. My own assets, got it. I know down to milepost how much fuel was burnt, and subdivisions and what engineer was on what train and so on and so forth. Foreign asset, not a clue, right? So again, it's all about how do I start treating foreign assets either on my track or on my train as if they are my own native assets. That's some of the limitations that I see.
Excellent, thank you, Mihir. And Jenny, how about you from your perspective on this issue of interoperability?
With interoperability, it really highlights the complications of how accurate and up-to-date are you with your locational awareness, whether it's people, resources, assets. Do you know where they are? Do you know where they should be? Do those two things match? Your plans may be plans, and that can be all that they are, but they're susceptible to change, and real-world scenarios blow those plans right out of the water. So being as accurate as you can to real world situations with increased locational awareness is where you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Kim, and from your perspective on this?
I know from our locomotive engineering folks, they are very intent on keeping track of the performance of our locomotives. They're very expensive assets, and when components fail, we need to know about it. I know they spend a lot of effort trying to get, if a traction motor goes down when my locomotive is offline, trying to get that actual same traction motor back under my care, and my tracking is essential. But so knowing where, what my performance is, whether my locomotive is online or offline, kind of completes the history, that health history of each of our assets that we have out there.
Yeah, for sure. And I know for us too, it's a lot of it is, our regulatory inspection period, right? Making sure those assets get back to a main shop facility so that we can meet those regulatory inspections, before they're dead in the water in the field.
Right, and it always helps to know who done it. If there's something crazy that happened or someone made a bad decision, we want to know who done it.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Jenny, I think we're going to start with you. This one is more in your wheelhouse. I think our next question is really sort of that whole pervasive technology. So we're going to ask the panel how. Tell us about what you know about systems that leverage pervasive computing in the business or your company's experience with it. And I think it's really in your wheelhouse. So we'll start there and we'll move across the panel.
Oh, what buzzword should I start with first? Let's see. You got everything from big data, LiDAR. You got those lovely point clouds that the first time it peppers your screen, you don't know what you're looking at. But once you get used to seeing it and you classify it, you're like, wow, this is my rail network in a bottle on my screen. I can tilt it, analyze it, zoom in, zoom out, do what you need to with it. Looking into GPS and real-time feeds, those are a lot of the big sources that we have. But we need to not forget about historical sources as well. Things on paper or vellum even. How do we get those into a digital format and leverage all of that information to help us make better business decisions for the railroad, whatever project it may be? How do I get my consist from A to B? How do I serve this customer? How do I build a new facility in a location that makes sense? What's nearby? Asking all of those questions help make the rail industry better and increase revenue and profits for the railroad, obviously. I like to look at it this way. We've all heard the phrase that 3 lefts make a right. Well, 3 rights make a best. And getting the right data, number 1, to the right people at the right time, 3 things, gets you the best decision. So 3 rights make a best.
It's really in your wheelhouse, Jenny. Great description for sure. You can certainly tell it's your forte. So that's awesome perspective. Mihir, let's hear Ytronics or Mihir's perspective on that issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jenny said it really well. So maybe I'll add a couple of my 2 cents. So one is, I think we touched on GPS, right? So how do I get real-time visibility to where my asset is, where my train is, right? So having a computer on board with all of these special things, I call them special things, like a GPS. We have a accelerometer on board, a Ytronics solution, so that tells me a possible bad track. If I'm getting too much vibration on one section of my track, and then I can send that as a real-time alert, or have an historical report, so railroads, your maintenance of way guys and engineering can analyze and take action. I have cameras on board, right? So how do I use cameras? Jenny touched on machine learning and machine vision. So how do I use onboard cameras, either outward facing or internal facing, apply machine learning techniques on it? And then again, the aim is to use these to solve for customer or railroad outcomes, right? So in this case, how do I detect a cell phone being used inside the cab, right? So if I have an inward facing camera, if I can apply machine learning on it, and I can tell in real time that, hey, engineer XYZ on train 1, 2, 3, 4 heading west near Kansas City was using cell phone for 10 minutes, and look, here's a picture, here's a video. I mean, bam, that's so to me, it's about how do we use these tools, these new widgets, for lack of a better word, but really solve for customer outcomes.
Yeah, for sure, Mahir. And you and I have had a discussion on cell phone technology detection on board locomotives. So fantastic advancements in that space for sure, as you know, we see the explosion of technology in society. So that's awesome. And Kim, from a railway perspective?
I'm going to take you down to the car perspective because there's all sorts of cool little sensors that you can put on from different manufacturers. But the big problem is generating enough power and generating communications to get that data back home. So on a rail car, of course, you're not going to have a place to plug in. At least in a locomotive you do, but on a freight car, they're relying on solar panels, better battery technology, even energy harvesting devices, which are pretty cool to think of the normal motion of a locomotive or a car can, you know, suck up that energy and store that to power up your sensors. But then you got one freight car that's got all sorts of sensors on it, and how do I get that data home? So you have to have some kind of communications package. So today, that whole MOATS idea is planning on, you know, sending data home individually through cellular, but that means multiple cars will have cellular, and car owner, if you have, you know, 5,000 cars, that means 5,000 cell phone bills too.
Mhm.
So that's another big challenge that they're working towards, to figure out how do I get enough not capacity, but enough cars that are out there. Because the eventual goal is to say, like, car number 4 would dump its data to car number 3, which dumps its data up the road up to the locomotive, so that all these cars talk to each other and pass that data along, and it gets assembled at the locomotive level, which has a comms package to go home. So that's the long-term goal for MOATS. But you know, with our 1.5 million cars in North America, it's going to be a challenge to get there. So there's this intermediate step now where each freight car will have to have its own communications package.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. And certainly in my neck of the woods in Canada, where even cell technology and satellite communication is in some very remote areas non-existent. So that certainly presents a challenge when you're in areas like that. So thanks everyone for those. I think next what we'll do is we'll throw some questions out, and you know, whoever feels they want to take a stab at the question, by all means, one of you or 2, 3 of you take a stab at the question, but we've just got some assembled here that we thought would be interesting. The first one that we wanted to pose to the panel was, what are some of the benefits and concerns of sharing data between railroads? And I know certainly for the railroads, it's a big concern, but so I don't know who wants to take a stab at it first. My first thought would be Kim, but Jenny, I know that's near and dear to your heart too with this whole data. So who wants to start with a?
Yeah, I'll start. We're always happy to share the data. If I can provide a status or a health risk, you know, like a maintenance to do to a car owner, I'm happy to do that, because if car owner fixes it, that's awesome. If car owner doesn't fix it, then usually it'll show up at a railroad shop. So if I can give you a to-do list that says these cars need this kind of moderate maintenance, or they can plan ahead, that's awesome, and they can take care of their own business. So we're happy to share data. We think that the more that you share, that improve the safety of our operations, which reduces all of our customer impacts as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, even nobody wants the cost of a derailment, you know, the visibility, the cost, you know, the public perceptions and all of those things that come with it, brand. And so, yeah, for sure. Jenny, how about you? I'm sure you must have some comments on it.
Data sharing is one of those things that you kind of catch yourself up and knock yourself into a ball about, because you're excited about it and you're ready to get the data and start diving into it, but you have to always take a step back and plan what you're going to do with it. Ask questions. Where's this coming from? What's its vintage? How trustworthy is it? What happens if I make a decision on imperfect data? That one just hits you in the gut every time. But what's the flip side of that question? What if I don't make a decision? What if I ignore what I'm trying to solve? Is there another way to solve it? I mean, it's just question on top of question. We go down this rabbit hole. But really, the first part of it is, what data is available? What format can we exchange it? Is this a one-time exchange, or is this a live feed or some set frequency, like a library book? Check it out every week, whatever it needs to be. What's the date or vintage of it? Am I basing my decisions on month-old data? Does that matter for the question at hand, or does it not? It depends on what your question is. And then when you get that data in hand, to those who provided it, do they need something back in return? Or is that data to help you provide an answer to the next person in line asking the question? So whether your time data is behind, or if you have a disclaimer, or I have switch information, but I can only tell you where it is and if it's left hand or right hand, but all the other details have been scrubbed for this purpose, XYZ. They don't have to go into details, but know that you're not getting the full picture. Does that still help with the analysis at hand? The goal at the end of transferring data and sharing it between vendors and the rolling stock and the railroads themselves is always keep the customer in mind, because we are here to bring them service. Yes, we want to do it safely. Yes, we want to make money, but here we want to do it through safe service.
Yeah, good point, Jenny. It's something I'm on the excitable side of the data, and I think it's the value, people like you bring to these kinds of issues for sure. Mahir, any thoughts, comments on the whole data sharing?
Yeah, I guess I'll add a couple of things. So incident investigation, right? I kind of touched on it. So if there's an accident, there's an incident, and there's data, event recorder, video data. The question there becomes, okay, how do I make sure that the data I send to a foreign railroad stays secure, right? Obviously, you want to make sure that copies of that don't show up on a local channel or doesn't show up on YouTube. So that's obviously a huge security concern that all railroads are definitely focused on. So that's kind of one end. The second piece, kind of allied to it, is how do I make sure that data share is enabled in the right circumstances, right? So if I have a foreign asset on my track, for example, right? I want to know if that foreign asset is stopped on the main line, because I may have network issues. If that foreign asset sees, for example, some possible bad track on my track, I want to know about it, right? But then if an engineer inside, back to my phone example, if an engineer inside that cab is using a cell phone, do I really, as the track owner, want to be involved in that? Not really, right? So there can be a case where too much data can be bad, right? So how do I get the right amount of data to the right people? I think I'm kind of echoing Jenny, at the right time. So that to me is kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, you need to talk to Jenny after, for sure. The next question I wanted to put to the panel was, what are some of the possibilities that railroads can take advantage of if railroads had access to global normalized data? I don't know who wants to start with that. Jenny, I feel like it's you. I don't know, all this data just feels like it starts with you. And, I think I'm over with Kim. We're all excited about all this data, but I think we rely on folks like you and me here to put these fancy tools on and then tell us what to do with all that once we gather it. So what do you think some of the possibilities that railroads can take advantage of if we had access to global normalized data?
I'm going to include myself in that ball of excitement and have to curb my enthusiasm here, but if you could have that global normalized data across railroads, whether it's a class one, a short line, a switching, or a terminal railroad there, however stock gets moved and goods are moved across the rail industry is what we're going for. So if we had access to global normalized data, oh my goodness, are you crazy? That'd be amazing. We could do so much with that. Our analysis would be quicker. We would have a better understanding of locational awareness throughout the entire industry. And I'm thinking North America specifically, because I haven't touched Europe. That's a whole other world over there. You can look at it from the perspective of wait times, slow orders. If you have planned maintenance, everybody knows when they're going to happen, when they're happening real time, how to move goods around those instances. Think of weather-related delays. It's hurricane season still. Hurricane Epsilon is way out there in Bermuda. It doesn't impact rail right now, but it's out there. We have future snows coming in, winters coming, how do we deal with those? So having that normalized data behind the scenes to allow that almost time sensitive information that sits on top of it, you now have a few common denominators to make your analysis from, rather than everything being its own variety. And there's a lot of benefit that can come from that. We're not there yet. We're slowly getting there.
But I will tell you, it takes a lot. It takes a lot to get that, whatever normalized means. We've been working for 10 years just to start pushing our wayside data in. And think of all the barcoding that we have that started out in wheels with the CEPM. I mean, we did that, what, in 2008 or 9? And that project took a year and a half, 2 years to get it done. And then we finally have incremented up to work on slack adjusters and castings and all of that. But all it takes, all of the railroads working together to say, here's the standard format, here's the Y made codes and all the job codes that go with that. For us to play in the same sandbox, we've got to have the same definitions and the same, secret job codes that are out there to get that done. And that stuff never moves fast, and it's not exciting or sexy or anything, but you got to have the standard taxonomy, as they call it, to get that done and to be able to move forward and share that data, because otherwise your data doesn't match my data, and then you get excited for a few minutes, and then it's you're like, oh, that's nice but not usable unless you figure out a way to standardize the language between all the roads.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, we have Mihir back. Thank you, Mihir. Did you want to give us your perspective? That's okay.
Sorry about that. Network connection issues.
Just wondering if you had any perspectives on some of the possibilities that railroads can take advantage of if you had global normalized data access.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as normalized, obviously across between different makes of locomotives, different US, I guess, metrics versus say Mexico versus somewhere outside. So just normalizing it by units is kind of where I start. But then how do I time match it, right? So I get data from one source, an event recorder, versus I get data from weather.com. How do I make sure all of them are time synced? How do I make sure they're space synced, right? So I want to show you a map view, I want to show you some imagery, I want to show you event record data, but then all of them better be at the same kind of time and lat long map, right? So to me, I look at normalized kind of more holistically. I look at it as unit sort of time normalized, and then space normalized. That's sort of how I see it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mihir. Thanks for coming back too.
No problem.
So I think in the essence of time, I know it's 14:38 now, and I will go to one last closing question and ask each of our panelists to maybe give their thoughts on this. What does railroad data sharing and a connected railway operation look like to you in 2 years from now, and 5 years from now, and in 10 years from now? And so, Kim, I hate always starting with you, but I just always think that that's the right place to start, because I have a train brain, right? And so I think it just makes sense to start with you. So I'm not trying to pick on you, but where do you, what does railroad data sharing and a connected railway operation look like to you in, say, those 2 years, 5 years?
So right now we're working a lot towards machine vision, which is all new stuff. And if we want to move forward and do inspections based on machine vision, that's a huge step. So taking the picture, whenever I teach a class about this stuff, I always say that taking pictures is the easy part, even when a train's going by at 60, 70 miles an hour. The hard part is figuring out what to do with that image and what am I looking at. Think about all the variability of the North American fleet and how different every covered hopper is in North America. So that's like baby step number one, is trying to figure out how do we, at the railroad level, how do we use all this image data? And then how do we share it is the next step. And then how do we move forward? How do we really, really use it to say, how to predictively plan maintenance? How do I change my operations so that I don't have to inspect every single car in every single train that comes into my yard? That's where we got to get to. And that will be, a year or two away for us. We're working that direction. But if you stay static now, you'll just be behind schedule a couple years from now when everybody else is moving ahead. So it's not a cheap date. All these machines are very expensive. I've had many bake sales trying to pay for them. But we're trying to move forward and get the future, to be here to make it beneficial to us.
Yeah, so true for sure, Kim. It's happening fast and furious. So Mihir, maybe from your perspective, your thoughts on this in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things. Kim touched on machine vision, right? It's something we spend a lot of time here at Vitronics thinking about. We have outward-facing cameras, inward-facing cameras. How do I use an outward-facing camera to do crossing inspections, right? I mean, I know when a gate is down when the train passes, if the lights are flashing, right? Why can I not take that imagery and apply VI on top or machine vision on top? And every time I do a pass by, I say, hey, the gate was down, the lights were flashing, or the right? Your other signs were up. So that's kind of one example. Same story on crossings and near misses, right? Again, when I pass a crossing, why can I not tell you that, hey, I almost hit a car at this crossing. The car was red and the timestamp was 1:41 p.m. at crossing ID 1234, right? I know all of that. Why can I not put that in a nice report that can be sent to you real time? So to me, those are some of the Kim touched on machine vision and those possibilities. The other thing I would say, I kind of touched on it, is how do I automate some of these mechanisms that exist today? Do I really want you to draw tripwires so anytime you guys cross, right? I know GPS, I can automate it for you. Do I have to have you manually share videos between each other, even if it's using like a Violet or some online technology? Why do I have to do that? If the asset is on your train, if the asset is on your track, why do I not make it behave like it's your own native asset, right? Why do I have to have a human be involved, right? As long as all the legal agreements are already in place, why can I not automate that, right? So that's the other frontier to me. The last thing I kind of touched on it is, do I have to have it time-based and incident-based, or can I give you access on demand? If it's on your track, it's your asset. If it's on your train, it's your asset. Done, right? You can use it for fuel. You can use it for real-time alerting. You can, the sky is the limit, right? So those are the big three areas, kind of how I see us progressing in the next 2, maybe even 5 years.
Yeah, and that's a big part of where your organization fits in for sure, Mihir, for sure. Jenny, from your perspective, what do you think?
I will keep this short and sweet, but in the next couple of years for data sharing, we want to level the playing field. If Railroad 1 calls something economic development, but Railroad 2 calls it industrial development, let's get on the same page, or somehow implement some sort of translator in the middle where we can have that constant communication without the delay of, wait, you're talking about one thing? That's the same thing over here. Oh, now we're there. Let's speed up that recognition between the two things. There's going to be a lot of focus on obtaining data, analyzing the data, and then securing it through permissions and cybersecurity, all of those great things coming out now. As technology becomes something that we no longer talk about, let that sink in for a minute. Let's not talk about technology on the rail because it's going to be there. It's a matter of what we do with the data put out from that technology, how we analyze it, and how we turn those results to focus on our customer needs.
Awesome, thank you. Well, it is now 14:43, so we are less than 2 minutes from ending our session. Yeah, Mihir, time flew. So I just want to thank our panelists. I just think this is a really great panel. I'm not sure who at LRW put it together, but wow, what a great panel, such diverse perspectives. Lots of sharing and lots of excitement and energy in this space for sure going forward. And I think that's the key is in the 2-year, 5-year, 10-year is where we're going to see even more, as Kim says, we started out with wayside hotbox detectors that were lagging indicators, and it was always after the fact and picked up on this stuff, and now we're way far from those days of looking at lights and getting all kinds of leading indicators and, tapping into people like Mahir's group and Jenny's to manage all this data and what to do with it is really where we're going. So at that, I think we're going to close our session to the panelists. So thank you, Kim, and thank you, Mahir, and thank you, Jenny, for your perspectives, your insights, and your sharing. That's been fantastic. And I will throw it back to Patricia from the LRW, who's got some closing comments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, panelists. That was very educational and insightful. So before we close, I'd just like to invite you to please save the date and join us for next year's annual conference, hopefully in person, in Indianapolis. Our conference is being held in partnership with the RSI show in September, so it's going to be great. And we do encourage you to also, join LRW, check it out, and attend our annual membership meeting in November. And lastly, special thanks to our corporate sponsors who helped us make this great session happen today. Also, if you have any questions on becoming a corporate sponsor, do visit us at railwaywomen.org. Thank you all for joining. I hope to see you tonight, actually, at Michelle's networking event. If you know a scary ghost story, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, see you tomorrow at the Personal Stories of Women in Rail panel and the Leveraging Social Networks for Rail Careers session. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day and take care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.